Scott Clancy, welcome to the conversation today.
Hey, thanks for having me, John.
It is a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Ontario, Canada. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about leadership development, talent management, and taking care of your team. I think all of these things go hand in hand. They really fit together nicely. And I think a lot of organizations, despite their best intentions, tend to do these things not so well, sometimes actually quite poorly. So we're going to try to unpack this and try to better understand how we can develop our people, how we can attract them in the first place, but then develop them and really just put care into the teams that we have so that we can hang on to them as well. As we get started, I wanted to share Clancy's bio with everybody. Major General Clancy, retired, has served in multiple squadrons of the Royal Canadian Air Force in the Canadian Armed Forces as a tactical helicopter pilot, as a director general on the RCAF, maybe I'm saying that wrong, staff. His responsibilities included all personnel, operations, logistics, infrastructure, and strategic planning for the entire RCAF. His last years of service saw him as the deputy commander of the Alaskan NORAD region, and finally, director of operations for all of NORAD in Colorado Springs. His 37 years of military experience leading and mentoring multifaceted teams in the US and Canada have resulted in the book entitled Developing Coaching Leaders. Now, I could go on, but I'm going to pause there. Anything else that you would like to highlight, General Clancy, before we dive on in further?
No, absolutely. Let's dive in.
Okay, well, a wonderful background. Again, thank you for joining me. Let's just start kind of with a foundation here. What do you think organizations, kind of generally speaking, are doing wrong when it comes to developing leaders?
So I'd say at the foundation, they're doing it not deliberately, but in a trial and error fashion. So what I mean by that, and,
Yeah.
and I do think that the military is like this as well. We're throwing people into supervisory positions. And this applies to coaches as much as it applies to leaders, right? Like, so my whole bridge here between coaching and leading is because I see a crossover between those two things. But that first supervisory position, let's say you're an accountant. Okay, you're a really good accountant. We're going to give you a team. So, now do the same output you had before. Oh, and now manage a team. First of all, nobody's telling you how to do that. Nobody's giving you any insights into this. They're just automatically giving you this team. And they think because you're a good accountant, you'll be a good leader of accountants. And that doesn't necessarily pan out. So to me, and seeing this through the military lens for a lot of years, we're just throwing people into the crucibles of these leadership positions without deliberately, one, figuring out what it is in terms of skills and behaviors that we want to incentivize by promoting people, and then two, giving them the coaching and mentoring that they need to be able to flourish and have their teams, more importantly, flourish in those situations.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, one way of framing that is often referred to as the Peter principle. So people get promoted to their level of incompetence, which is kind of a snarky way of putting it.
Yep.
And it's not even, that's not even to knock the person, who is promoted to their level of incompetence. It's often to take a knock at the organization, the people that promote them, right? To your point, just because someone is a great salesperson or a great technician or a great whatever, at kind of the ground level or the customer facing level or the front lines, doesn't mean they're going to be a good supervisor, doesn't mean they're going to be a good leader. Yet that's usually how we determine who's going to then be promoted to those leadership roles. And like you, I'm a firm believer that anyone who's supervising people all the way on up to senior executive levels, they're leading people, right? And so even the lowest kind of first rung supervisor level, they're leaders, they're leading people. And even at that level, oftentimes people are just thrown in and they don't have a clue what to do in terms of the basic kind of managerial and leadership functions, a lot of kind of the basic kind of HR type functions that you have to do when you're in that kind of a role. And when they don't get the coaching, they don't get the mentoring, they don't get the training to know how to do it, what do they fall back on? They basically just do what they've seen other people do around them. And sometimes we get lucky. Sometimes they had great people around them. And so they model their behavior after great people. But a lot of times they model their behavior after people who also didn't know what they were doing, and those people did lots of things wrong. And so we just perpetuate, this cycle of a lot of well-intentioned people probably who are doing the best they know how, but don't know what they're doing. And so we just see a lot of negative, bad behaviors perpetuated over and over and over again, simply because we're not intentional. We're not preparing them. We're not helping leaders to be successful in the roles that we're putting them into. And how frustrating if I'm a successful person in my career and then I'm promoted into a role where I have a small level of opportunity or a slim chance of being successful because my organization's not investing in me to be successful. That's kind of frustrating, isn't it?
So I think that you're right on to something here, John. A couple of things. The first thing I would say is we talk about, those first rung of leaders, and we say things like, even they need to
Hmm.
be, good leaders. But the reality is the data shows that the number one reason why people are leaving organizations is that first level
Yeah.
supervisor.
Yeah.
And they're the ones with the least amount of actual experience in it. So here's the kind of mantra. If people are going to take away a gem, here it is. By the time you promote someone to that first level of supervisor, you wanted to already have seen them in a supervisory role. So long before you decide to promote that, accountant or salesperson to managing a team, you would have wanted to put them in a leadership and or management position, even temporarily, given them exposure to it so that you could see how they're going to react. One, two, you would have wanted to give them feedback on that so that they
Hmm.
could learn from that. And then you want to see how they're going to learn from that feedback. Because that's the one thing that you really want from leaders, is to be able to learn from mistakes, and you're going to see their character from that. And so to me, if you do those few things right, then you get the start of a talent management system that's going to be more intentional, more deliberate with knowing what they want to promote, and in giving the tools out to the people that they do want to promote.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So it starts with that intentionality. It starts with a deliberate system in place, so that you can, if you have that deliberate intention, that you can go beyond intention, and that you can actually now, have processes, have a system to be able to deliver on that intention, right? And whether you decide you're bringing in people externally or you're promoting from within and you're developing a pipeline of people, to take over these roles, supervisory, first rung supervisory on up, through the hierarchy of the organization, that you're giving people stretch opportunities, kind of low stakes stretch opportunities before they get into the real situation, right? And I would imagine in the military that you see this all the time. Like you don't want someone's um first high pressure situation to be, in combat. Like you want them to like have been in stressful situations first, probably.
Well, so this is, the military does this. I think that part of placing people in the crucible of seeing how they're going to perform, that there's an awful lot of training in the military. There's an awful lot of
Mhm.
professional development. We think deeply about the concepts of trust,
Mm.
loyalty, ethics, a lot of these things, these leadership styles versus approaches, how you adjust approaches, how you think about these things, how you communicate well, how you listen, all of these concepts I find military people think about very deeply, and they're ingrained into our professional development system. But more than that, and speaking to your point, with the talent management, I ran the talent management system for the Royal Canadian Air Force for a period of a couple of years. And it has to be at all levels, right? That you have to have a common approach and vision throughout all levels of your organization. That's not just where the organization is going. This is the vision for, I don't know, whatever large company or small company that you have, but what your vision is for the people, because translating that vision to what it means to those individuals. This is what I call inspired execution. That's really what's going to make the difference. And then being able to translate how that manifests into behaviors and skills that you want from your leaders. Now you've got the perfect alignment. Why do I want to go take this course? Because that's going to help you with this, and that's going to help you, get forward here. But I'd like to roll the clock back in just a second, because I don't want
Mm.
to poo-poo too much the role of competence as a leader, right? As we get into higher and higher levels, you still have to have a requisite level of
Sure.
competence to
Yeah.
be able to embody trust. Now, on the battlefield, as a helicopter pilot, I have to be able to do the business, but I have to know, especially as I start commanding larger and larger formations of troops, I have to know enough about the business to be tactically astute, to be really professional in that task. But quite honestly, that's about professional curiosity, because the more that you study, the more that you want to know, and the more that you're going to develop that. You don't have to be the best technician, and you definitely don't want to replace necessarily that technician. And the more that you rise up to middle and executive management, the less you're going to actually know about, the
Hmm.
specifics of any one mission or roles. This comes back to that trust. Know enough to ask the right questions and embody that trust with those individuals, and then formulate your decision making based upon
Hmm.
those things. And that's, so there's an element of role with that. I don't want to push that completely aside, but those management processes that you talk about in talent management have to combine those two elements together.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Nobody wants to be led by someone who is a complete bumbling idiot, completely incompetent, right? Nobody wants that. But once you move into that leadership role, you are the leader of experts. You are no longer the one that's, that everything funnels through, that you're supposed to be the expert of everything, right? Because you can't maintain expertise in every area, especially the higher up you go, because you have so many different people with so many different various areas of expertise. And so you need to have competency, you need to have expertise for sure. And you need to have this level of confidence, and people have to have confidence in you. Like they need to know that you are someone who's capable, who's intelligent, who's curious, someone who's continually learning. All of those things are really essential. And if those are in place, you're not necessarily going to stay the top in your technical field, but you are competent, you are capable, you're intelligent, and they can see that. And now you empower them to lead out in their expert areas of expertise. And that's, I think, where the power comes in, right? As we have the synergies in our teams.
So what I like to talk about is a level of competence that will instill trust, right? So you have to, as you move into different levels, you're going to have to establish trust with your teams, and you're going to have your team trust you with respect to the decision making that you're going to make, or else all of the interactions are going to be power based. I'm your
Mm,
boss, do what I tell you. And
yeah.
a lot of people will look at the military and saying, yeah, well, that's exactly how you guys work. Well, the reality is that most Occidental militaries are all volunteer forces. So they'll vote with their feet very quickly with bad leaders. And so the answer really is you're going to have to engender that trust with a level of competence, but also a level of care. So what I always say is there's competence, confidence, and humility have to combine together here so that you can be held accountable, but at the same time, you can hold your teams accountable. It's one thing to say, I don't really know all of your technical skills, so I trust you, but I'm going to ask a lot of really detailed questions so that we can make the best decisions together. If I just let you run willy-nilly and you're the expert in that field, then where's the accountability for me? So that
Hmm.
two-way street is something that you develop as a team, and the more that you develop together, right? Not one independently, not leader and team independently, but together. That's where you get that teamwork. That's the dream, teamwork makes the dream work, right? That's where the magic comes in, because that'll develop that mutual level of trust. I think trust underpins just about everything that we do, character-based and competence-based trust.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think trust is that foundation. And a lot of times we forget that, and we just kind of assume that if you're the leader, you automatically have the trust of your people. And we know that's not true. We've all been in situations where just because you have position authority, it doesn't mean you have the trust of your people. So we definitely have to make sure that we earn and maintain the trust of our people, and we have to develop mutual accountability and trust with our teams, um, so that we can have, a dynamic, psychologically safe, dynamic learning environment where we can build off of the competencies and capabilities of each other to drive really great, results in our teams. Whether we're talking about the military, whether we're talking about, a tech company or whatever type of organization that we might be talking about. I think the general principles still apply. And that's what gets me excited when I think about, leadership development, when I think about talent management systems, is like they're really, I mean, there are unique things about different types of organizations, different types of industries, different types of sectors, but there's also some pretty, um, you know, cross-reaching principles that I think are going to be pretty vital regardless of where you're at. And ultimately, if we can, like you said from the very outset, if we can be intentional about what we're doing, if we can build on a foundation of trust from the very beginning, and if we can recognize the need to invest in our people through that intentionality, that's like, I don't know, 80% of the battle right there,
Yeah, absolutely.
to try to get to where we want to go. It's not going to get us all the way, but that'll put us, in the top quartile of organizations, in terms of getting to where we want to be, just because so many organizations, despite whatever their good intentions are just churning, and they're just like spinning around like a whirling dervish trying to just, get to payroll and just putting out fires and just trying to get their product or service out every day, and they don't spend the time thinking about these things, or putting the intentionality behind these things. I also think the last kind of piece to this that I said in the introduction is just caring about your team. So when we focus on leadership development, when we focus on talent management systems, getting the right people in, developing them, keeping them, that all, I think, relates back to this idea of caring about your teams. I'm a big fan of the general concept of servant leadership. That as a leader, probably the most important thing I can do is develop the people that I lead. If I'm a successful leader, that means I'm going to help the people, on my team to develop and exceed, what they believe their potential is, that they can become, the greatest possible version of themselves. And that takes great care. That means I have to set my ego aside. That means I can't get stuck on, trying to constantly think about how I look good, or what they're doing for me to get ahead in my career. But I'm focusing on helping them look good, helping them develop, helping them grow, helping them get to the next rung of their career. And guess what? When I do that, it also actually has the byproduct of helping me look good and helping me get ahead in my career as well. But it's a difference in kind of mindset. It's a difference in intentionality and focus, and people notice the difference big time. They know when you're focusing on yourself first, and they notice when you're focusing on them and trying to help them um, achieve their goals and grow and develop. Can you tell us more about like what your approach has been throughout your career in caring for your team, but doing it in a way that also, gets towards performance goals? Because I think sometimes people think it's an either or. You either like drive toward performance or you care. And I think that's a silly dichotomy. But tell us like some of what you've done in the past.
So I think you're bang on here from a military perspective. First, I would say that when you enter the military, uh, the focus isn't on leadership. So I joined as an officer.
Mm,
I went to one of our Canadian military academies, similar to West Point or the Air Force Academy. Ours are all joint, so it's all the services together. But the focus when I got there and through my basic training and through almost all of my military career hasn't been on me as a leader. It's been on the creation of teams and how to
mm,
build and create teamwork. You know, the aspect of military leaders that I think that people lose at the front end is that they care so deeply for the teams that they're a part of. And I do mean good leaders, right? So we're
yeah.
going to take toxic and bad leaders and just kind of cut them aside and stick with, this is the persona of what good leaders are being. And if you listen to military leaders and military people, and I don't think there's a difference between those two things. I think all people can lead at any point in time. It really depends on the situation. And I like that Occidental militaries are embracing the concepts of followership as leadership traits and leadership skills, more widely. But we focus on teams first, much well first. And when we talk, I'll speak to my confreres that I still speak with, since I left, and we'll say that, I love you more than I hear any other, especially men say to other men
Mm,
anywhere, because that's very true. there's a real bond there with respect to military service based upon the principle that I would give my life for the person that's sitting beside me. But more than that, it is that professional care that you have for the people and the members of your team. So, for example, and that balance between mission and people, which I write about kind of extensively in the book. How do you balance those things there? And I think that the concept to me that makes the changing point is a concept that I would call inspired execution. And the
Mhm.
whole idea here is that you're going to have to push people towards a lofty vision. You push people towards that lofty vision, you can do so on the backs of your people. The only way to tie those individuals to that vision, especially one that's going to be reach goals, the ones that might be even beyond the capability of the team or the sum total of that individuals, is tying their individual development to that. So
Yeah.
when I was a lieutenant colonel, I got given the responsibility to plan and mount operations for Afghanistan. I was in a helicopter wing. The Chinook helicopters that we sent to
Mm.
Afghanistan, Canada did not own. We leased American Chinooks. So let's get this straight. We're going to send people into combat. The first time that they were going to fly together was in Afghanistan. The first time that they were going to fly in the machines and support them was going to be in Afghanistan in combat. And they were never going to be able to do that. I was not going to be able to marry the escort helicopters with those Chinooks until they actually got there. And then we were going to be fighting the instant we got there. And so you think of the challenges of that kind of a vision for and then we're going to have to sustain that over years and years and years, relying especially on our American brothers to help train us as individuals. That's a real lofty goal. Now I'm going to turn to that young first officer and say, you're going to go down to the States and you're going to do this training, then you're going to come back, you're going to do the simulator ride, you're going to go with the National Guard, and then we're going to deploy you. Over the course of that deployment, you're going to get enough experience so that when you come back, you're an aircraft commander, you're going to train the next rotation, then the next rotation, you're going to deploy. As well. I've tied that individual's development to that lofty vision. Do you know what we're doing here? We're getting people off those roads. We're avoiding those improvised explosive devices that are killing
Mm.
folks. This is why this is, and you are an integral cog in how that, as a leader, the most important thing you do, and never underestimate your ability to influence, junior people within your organization to explain their role in there and how their personal development is tied and how your care for them. I need you in this. I'm having problems with my family and I'm not sure I can do this routine. Okay, well, whatever we do, we're going to work with you because you are so valued inside this organization. You're an integral team. That's what I call inspired execution. You've inspired them to that goal and you've inspired them via their own personal development as well.
Well, and they feel so much purpose, right? In how you're framing that up. That's a purpose-driven, goal and the work that they're doing. It's not just about a paycheck. It's not just about, I don't know, any of the external extrinsic types of things that people might be driven by sometimes in performance. And a lot, I mean, let's get straight here for a minute. Like a lot of times, a lot of what organizations do to try to get towards performance goals are these extrinsic carrots and sticks types of motivators. And what you just described has nothing to do with the carrots and sticks, right? That was like a purely purpose driven kind of goal that gets towards someone's intrinsic motivators, and I love that. No, that's not to say there's never a time and a place for a carrot or like some sort of like a monetary reward or those sorts of things. There's a time and place for those things too. But the point is, you were showing care, you were showing development, you were showing a belief, like a trust in your team member. Like not only was there a purpose there, but you were showing a belief in them. Like, you can do this. I believe in you, that you can accomplish this, and you're going to be able to fulfill this great purpose. Um, and especially when you have developed a good relationship with your team, that is meaningful. Like that goes a long way, because you want to succeed with each other. You want to succeed and perform for each other. So I think that's just super powerful. I love what you just shared there. Well, Scott, I noticed the time. This has been flying by. Before we start to wrap things up, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, how they can find out more about your work, the speaking that you do, where they can find your book, all of those things, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Oh, thanks, John. So www.scottclancy.ca. That's my website. There's a link there to my book, which is available Audiobook, if you can handle listening to 8 hours of my voice. It's funny, my son actually listened to the audiobook, and I would have thought that was the last thing that he would have wanted to do. The book is Developing Coaching Leaders, the fundamentals and techniques that make leaders extraordinary. I also deliver leadership workshops and things like that, trying to make teams better. I do speaking engagements and things like this. Depending on the organization, I give a lot back to the community. So depending on your organization, I do some of this stuff, obviously pro bono, so that because I want to be a thought leader. And I also have a leadership forum. I interview leaders and talk about people, concepts, and tools, real pragmatic tools to get people leading forward. My last note will go back to trust. Because I want to leave your listeners with a quick tip on trust. We talked about how it's foundational and all the rest of the stuff. Have you spoken to your team about how you trust as a leader?
Mm.
So just ask them this question, or tell them how you trust. I'm 100% trust person. So as a leader, I trust everybody on my team the minute that I meet them at 100%. And I acknowledge that I have to earn their trust as a leader. That's fine. But I'm going to trust you with 100%. You have nowhere to go but up. You're just going to keep on saying 100% until, things prove otherwise. And by opening that conversation about saying things like, trust isn't a yes or no binary thing, that conversation alone will start you on the path of being a more curious and caring leader about your team.
Yeah, I love that. Scott, thank you so much. This has just been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Scott can do for you. Check out the book. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.